All right, well, this is Aaron Squire coming to you guys again tonight, and I've got HexBoss on with me. He's the boss of Hex.
Yes, that is correct. I
boss.
am.
Meh.
I have
boss.
debated this on various Twitch channels before. I think Revolution and I were having a bit of a discussion on that. He called himself the boss. I'm like, nope.
No,
nope,
who's
there's
the
only
boss?
one boss
Who's
here.
the boss? That's right.
There's only one boss, yes.
Who's the boss?
Now, he's cool because he is the Revolution. So, I mean, he's got that going for him.
And he actually made it into my game. I don't know if he knows that, but I actually,
really?
yeah, I'm going to mention that later. As far as I'll pitch my game a little bit later. But we're going through the intro, so we're also going to talk about a quick threshold controversy. I missed an episode, so I listened to last week's episode, and they talked about some of the different stores that are out there and how they could be competing with the online auction house. We're also going to talk about how excited we are that drafts are live for everybody.
And there was much rejoicing.
And then Cryptozoic decided to like hose me and send out this last second updates and give me like 20 minutes to read it. So we got the Friday update, which doesn't have a lot to it, so it wasn't too bad. And we're going to do a Pauper deck. So let's go ahead and jump right in with my guest HexBoss, who is here. And just tell me a little bit about your TCG background, HexBoss.
Well, for TCGs, I have a little bit of Magic experience, but I didn't actually. I think my introduction to it was actually, I think my college back a couple of years ago when just some friends invited me to the house. They said, "Hey, we have Magic the Gathering. You want to play with us?" And I hadn't before, so I was like, "Sure, why not pick it up?" And it was the first game that I remember playing it, and like I hadn't picked this game up before. Fell in love with it. I was like, dude, if any game could possibly, take me away from like, World of Warcraft or something like that, this game would be it. I love this game right now. And my big CCG experience actually was I was addicted to this game. Back in, I think it was middle school, there was a baseball trading card game called
MLB Showdown.
MLB Showdown.
Yeah,
yes.
I remember that. I remember people talking about that.
That was good. That was my first real introduction. I didn't play in tournaments or whatever. I would just buy the packs, buy the cards, and then play against my dad. So many good childhood memories about that. But loved the game to death until they destroyed it in the 3rd edition.
Right.
But that was really my big introduction. Of course, as a kid, I grew up playing Pokemon cards like most everybody. So
right. So yeah, you're probably a little bit younger than me. Yeah, I took my brother's deck into the schoolhouse with all the kids playing Pokemon just to destroy kids.
Yes.
I was mean like that, yeah. And then, of course, after I did, like, I get these random kids like come up to me all sheepish, and they'd be like, "Hey, could you build me a deck?" and dump like all these cards on me, which are like half of them are like mangled.
I know. It's like,
take care of your cards, kids.
Charizard. Here we go. I still remember as a kid, like the biggest surprise I got was like we would compare Pokemon card decks, and one of my buddies got a holographic Charizard, and I remember I was like,
"Oh man, yeah.
This thing has 100 hit points! Holy cow!"
Yeah, I still remember when it was worth like $100 or something.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
All right,
to
so
their credit, the game is still going pretty strong.
They fixed it. Nowadays, it's a little bit more balanced than it was back then.
Yeah, the one thing that I do find interesting, about that is it is interesting for me to know that unlike other card games, like the MLB Showdown, was bad about this, but you look at Pokemon cards now, and even back when they first came out, and there have been changes, but by and large, the card game has remained the same, which I think is a plus.
Right,
I think
for sure.
It's good.
Yeah, they didn't have to change mechanics as much, They've changed a couple of nuanced things with Magic, and during Alpha we saw some changes with the mechanics where they were testing things out and enraging people on forums. So just tell me. So just tell me a little bit about how you found Hex, and then talk to me about the different content. You're obviously a content producer because you came on my show, because that's the people I invite on. So talk to me about those two things.
Well, I actually got introduced to Hex kind of an interesting way. And I mentioned that I play World of Warcraft and still do, but not as much as I really used to. And there's a, I go to sites like WoW Insider or MMO Champion. If any of you watching the stream play WoW, you may know those two sites. And WoW Insider, occasionally they would post about other MMOs and stuff like that. And they had a post that talked about, hey, so Cryptozoic, the makers of the WoW TCG, just launched their Kickstarter for this game. And I checked it out, and I was hooked. I backed it pretty shortly thereafter, and that was, I think, maybe in the first few days of their Kickstarter had been posted. So, yeah, I found out about Hex through a WoW fan site. So kind of unusual there, but yeah, I've been hooked on the game since.
Right, right. Yeah, actually, I found it through my brother. So, I mean, I've talked to people about that a lot before. I'm not going to go into that story, but yeah, I mean, the game is really good. I really trust them. They haven't banned that many cards out of the WoW TCG when they took it over. Kind of lost the license due to Hearthstone, the lesser WoW TCG, and you know,
Yeah.
so I really trust this company. I think that we're gonna get a great product when it comes out. So
Yes.
so
Yeah.
the content you're doing on your site is what kind of
It's
content
mostly
exactly?
PvE content. I've got,
Okay.
I know a bunch of you watching me know me from Twitter as HexBoss underscore Codex. I know at least one of you in the chat. I think it's Sprinkles that knows me from that. I also have HexBoss TV on Twitter, or on Twitch, excuse me. My main site is hexbosspve.com, and HexBoss is going to be, it's going to be focused on lore and PvE content for the game. Unfortunately, we haven't had much of either of those released at this point, so it's kind of sparse on the information. But I've got, you know, a card directory right now, so you can look up any of the cards in the game with set 1. It's going to include, you know, guides, video, and written for quests, dungeons, and raids. So pretty much anything related to the PvE or the lore content, you're going to be able to find information on there, you know, once it's, again, actually released.
Yeah. So I know we didn't kind of go over this question, but so do you do like Dungeons and Dragons at all in your off time? Have you ever DM'd?
I don't.
No,
I mean,
not really.
I haven't. The closest Dungeons and Dragons thing that I've done was a board game, the Lords of Waterdeep, with
Oh,
some,
okay.
so
Yeah, I think
I
that
mean,
was
other
like
than that, like my
favorite.
main, yeah, I've done World of Warcraft, you know, mostly PvE and
Right.
raiding for years. So in terms of a strict card game, not so much. But in terms of PvE content, that's, you know, similar-ish, I guess.
Right.
Do that. That's what I'm playing.
It's kind of a funny thing for me. Like right now, I've actually got some people that are really interested, like in Dungeons and Dragons. So I'll be running a game for them tomorrow off of some of my old modules that I wrote. And just as a segue, I'll just talk real quick, just real quick footnote about the game that I just produced. It's called Constantine. I wrote it in RPG Maker. It's a little bit rough around the edges. I'm going to make a couple of tweaks to it this weekend. But if you guys want to check it out, it's on my YouTube. If you go to my YouTube, and it's like RPG Maker Dev Blog 2. You can watch the dev blog where I talk about it. But if you want a complete, untainted gameplay, then probably play the game first and then watch the dev blog, because the dev blog might give away some things about the game. So, you know, ruin some of the surprises. It's actually got some hex little like things in there. Like I put Hex Hunter Mokog in there, and I've got what's his name? I've got a Revolution in there, and you know, in the future, I mean, I can just keep adding more and more to it. I am going to move into some different development stuff right now as I'm trying to build up some sort of game development portfolio. But yeah, it's pretty exciting to do. So so yeah, here I'll just post it in the chat, and it will also be posted on the YouTube video. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just pull this up real quick. I'll just pull up the YouTube video that it's on while we're doing this. And HexBoss, talk to me a little bit more about your PvE content if you had anything else to say while I'm doing this.
Not really. I mean, at this point, you know, there isn't that much to talk about in terms of what's on the site. I do have, with a couple exceptions that I need to iron out, just all the cards in set 1 you can look up, and it's going to have, you know, again, a lot of the content on HexBoss is going to come once the information is released. In terms of like most of the PvE encounters or the equipment, the only information that we got was during Kickstarter. We haven't even seen anything, you know, during the alpha phase or the beta phase, and while they're working on it, there's not really much to update at this point. I did update with a post on the, before beta released, Corey did a brief spoiler on his blog post about the, I believe it was the Kraken's Gold encounter, and so I put that up there. But pretty much as soon as we start getting PvE,
some exciting mechanics there.
Yeah, that spoiler, there was a lot behind that I really liked. And so the thing is, once we have PvE spoilers and PvE content coming out, there's going to be a lot more material posted on HexBoss, as well as on my Twitter or Twitch channel as well.
Right. Right. So I think we're going to move on to the Threshold store controversy thing. So I was listening to Threshold's podcast today, and I'm a little bit behind. They actually have a couple of things. I believe that they just released their set 1. It's 2.5 hours long. I didn't listen to all of this one. It was basically going over all the different cards. But the week before that, they talked about different things. And as a footnote, they talked about how there are different stores out there. Hex CCG Pro has one, and I believe Infamous Neo has one. And you know, there's going to be a lot of stores that are coming out. And the question that came up was, are these stores counterproductive to try and support Hex in that they are basically undercutting. They could be undercutting the auction house, and I would say no, they're not. Not anymore counterproductive than your brick and mortar store that sells you singles, or your buddy, or your friend, or anything. Or if you go to Magic Online, there's all those bots that you can buy cards from. All those things are outlets for you. You can go to eBay and do a lot of that type of thing. That's going to happen. The cards are tradable, they're sellable. I'm pretty sure that Cryptozoic's going to support that. The easiest way is for people to get cards is going to be on the auction house, but those values are going to fluctuate wildly. So when you're using a website, you may be able to get a bit better deal on the auction house. You might not. It depends on how much looking you want to do. And there's a chance that it may not even be on the auction house or on eBay or this and that. So HexBoss, you have anything to like add to that, or your thoughts on that?
I mean, for me, I guess I'd have to listen to the Threshold podcast to actually hear what they're, what specifically they're saying.
Right.
So I'll have probably do that after the show. Initially, like, I'm not at all concerned about it. I mean, for me, number one, my first question whenever people do something like this is, okay, is it against the terms of service? It's not. Cryptozoic has made that clear. So that's my biggest concern, frankly, is so long if words, try using them. So long as Cryptozoic and Hex are fine with it, that to me is the biggest thing. So we're not having to worry about any. Yeah, that's the bottom line.
But if you're but if you're a content provider like I am, like if I decide to have a store, obviously I'm part of HexCCG Pro, so like I would probably just default to their store. But like if I decide to have my own store and I'm also a content provider, am I doing a disservice to Cryptozoic? I don't think I would be, but I think that was the major question.
No, really not, because you have to keep in mind that even though Cryptozoic would get some of the proceeds from using the auction house via the platinum, players will be getting that too. I mean, even on the auction house in game, the people who benefit the most are the players.
Right. Right.
And the thing is, if you're hosting your own store, you have to keep in mind that there are other costs associated with that.
Right.
If you're going for if you simply want to trade cards or whatever, or to exchange things, use the auction house. There's a lot more layers of complexity that are involved in having your own online store, in terms of even just maintenance fees and maintaining that. So the fact that you would get a profit and Cryptozoic wouldn't get anything from an outside store, I think that's fine. And again, Cryptozoic is used to that business model. Remember, their bread and butter is making physical card games, physical board games. They're used to that business reality of having third party stores and people. Yeah, secondary markets.
Right.
So I would think that they've even taken that into account. The question there is, if you're doing your own store, are your prices fair? You're running the most risk by doing that. And if people like HexCCG Pro or Infamous Neo, he's got his own store as well. If they're able to make that work, I don't see a problem.
More power to them. Right. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, it's not like it's easy to do. So don't really see too much of a problem with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on, the drafts are live. So this will kind of bring us to the updates. We'll go ahead and swap over to this. The drafts are live finally. Like I think it was on Tuesday. We thought the drafts were going to be live. I embarrassed myself like all week. I set up my stream and I'm like, I'm going to draft. And then I get in and be like, yeah, the drafts are not working. And then like Wednesday came around and I was like, I'm going to draft and I'm going to post it and it'll be the first draft ever and stuff. And then it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Then Thursday came around and they were like, drafts are working. And I was like, all right, I'm going to draft. And then I decided to post my game out and that took forever. And I was doing a whole bunch of other things. So
yeah,
maybe I'll get to do my first draft this weekend at some point in time.
It didn't happen. So.
Right. So it's funny, too, that it kind of coincided. They kind of point out that there was the NFL draft that happened at the same time.
We were all drafting and everybody's like, NFL? What? What is this? What's this football of which you speak?
So moving on with the Friday update, the tournaments, the tournament time update, they're talking about another exploit that has popped up, and this is when you have Ruby Threshold and you have the Ruby of Flames socketed into your troop, it's active all the time. You don't have to have your Ruby Threshold up, which is not working as intended. So please, please do not exploit this. Don't use it to your advantage to one-up other players. If you do, there could be some repercussions. A player could report you, and then there could be some problems. And I'm sure they can go back through the logs and check on different things like that happen. So just don't do it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that. HexBoss?
Yeah. The thing, I mean, you look at Ruby of Flames, and You know, I mean, it requires. It's a minor gem, but it requires no. Yeah, it's a minor gem.
It's a minor because you throw it in.
It's a minor, but it still requires 2 ruby threshold. I mean, even if it was just 1, it's still an exploit. But this is 2. This is supposed to be used in a deck that really doesn't even have ruby as a splash.
Right.
So don't just no. I mean, it's never good. Don't misunderstand me. It's never good to exploit these things. But this one especially, just no. The entire way it's designed, being able to exploit it is just incredibly antithetical to the philosophy behind it. So, yeah, no.
Right. Then they mentioned basically some people are not possibly getting their Kickstarter rewards, so make sure to contact their support line. Pretty obvious there. Then Hextex.
And make sure you double check your emails.
Hextex has launched their website, so I encourage you guys all to go out there. So you know, it's in the update. They actually released this card just to Hextex. So I mean, they got the spoiler first. So I'm going to get it secondhand here, but it's Mentor of the Song, which is a 2/1 creature for 3 and 1 Sapphire threshold. When this troop dies, transform it into Oracle Song and put it in your hand. Oracle Song, of course, is 3 and 1 Sapphire threshold. Draw 2 cards. And so it's really, this is just amazing card advantage for this card. It's a common card.
Yes.
So anything else to add?
Not really. I mean, you know, I always like seeing Coyote cards. I'm a fan of the race. I'm probably going to play them along with the Shin here first. So that's personally like the card. But yeah, I mean, it really does set up. I mean, with a 2 attack, you can trade efficiently with most anything that's going to drop on turns 1, 2, and 3. So someone, I think it was actually Havoc, who posted that. He mentioned that it will trade really well. Plus the card draw at the end. So to me, it seems like a very good value card.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to make its way into a lot of control decks as an early drop to stabilize, I think. Yeah, it's just gonna. It's a nice thing to fill in that 3-drop slot now that Sapphire and Blood control kind of lost Inquisitor at the 3-point slot. It's another a nice filler for that to replace that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's the first card to my knowledge that we've seen that actually is one card that transforms directly into another one that you can just normally get. Normally, cards like this will transform into a token, or it'll have its own special card. But this one, we're actually seeing it transform into something that is usable. I mean, what's interesting is, theoretically, with this card, you could potentially get about 8 Oracle Songs in your hand, or in your deck, via use of this card.
Right. There's also a chance for abuse with some sort of graveyard recursion as well. Which could be interesting. So probably the best way to deal with them is
Replicator's Gambit on Mentor of the Song.
Solitary Exile is probably going to be the best way to deal with this guy.
Probably.
And then second to that right now would be a Chaos Key, because it removes it from play, and then your opponent won't get the Oracle Song because it says when he dies, and so removing from play is not dying. Just so everyone's
But that being said, if your opponent is burning a Solitary Exile or a Chaos Key on a common 3 card, that in itself is a pretty good trade.
Yeah, for you, for sure.
Yeah.
So moving on with the update, they're talking about the Apprentice program. They kind of run you through a day. I'm not going to go through it. Pretty interesting reading. So I encourage you to go out and just read through this, especially if you're interested, like I am, in getting into the game industry in general. Just read through that, see what their day is like. It just kind of gives you a little bit more insight into what they're going through and how it is that all the teams are basically working and keeping a machine running that's going to keep turning out this game. It's not like they're all focused on set 1. Like, we've got people that are working on set 2 and 3, and they've got people that are ironing out different clients and doing PvE content. I mean, there's a lot of different little moving parts to this game, so I encourage you to get out and read the dev blog to see how that's, or I'm sorry, the Apprentice program blog portion of this update.
Yeah, they keep saying there's PvE content, it's coming, we promise. I'm like, just release them already.
It's going to be an arena of some sort, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just like, look, even just a couple boss encounters, just please. A, I want to do it. B, I really need stuff from my site. I mean, guys, come on. But I think Threshold Podcast is actually going to be going. They mentioned this on Twitter. They're going to be heading over to the Cryptozoic offices to get some stuff, and they said, yeah, we're going to get the inside scoop on PvE, and I'm like, take me with you, please.
Yeah,
please.
But
I can fit into a suitcase.
NDAs,
I will contort myself into a suitcase to go with you guys to Cryptozoic. So,
yeah, they'll also be signing non-disclosure agreements, so I mean, it's not like you can really say too much anyways.
No, there isn't.
So,
but still, I mean, they get to play with stuff. I mean, they actually get to play with the dungeons or whatever there. So,
moving on to the deck doctor, we've I'm not. No one has told me what shard they want me to do. So Pauper format, for everyone that doesn't know, is basically all commons, except you get 5 uncommons. So this kind of restricts us. So we already have no rare cards, and the reason why we're doing it this week is because of people's collections are still pretty small. And so I kind of wanted to do something that people could build and try out for themselves, and they wouldn't have to necessarily buy a lot of packs and get the rare cards and all that stuff. So, and of course, as always, as I have, I believe it's Sprinkles, asked me about how in the world can I get a deck to you so you can doctor it. And so next week, Sprinkles, if you get a deck to me, I should be able to get to it. You'll be the first person in queue. I have nobody in queue right now. And what you'll do is go to hexccgbrowser.com or something like that, make your deck, save it, and then post it out to me. Either send it to me over my Twitter or send it to me via YouTube message, or you can send it to me via Twitch message. Any of those things will work. And then I will get it on the show next week. And next week we've got, I believe, Hex Colin is going to come on, as long as everything lines up. Of course, Hex Colin is one of the bigger names in the Hex community, someone that's done a lot for different people. So, working on his Pauper deck, so far, still, somebody in chat needs to tell me which shard they want me to do. Someone's saying green-red.
Yeah, somebody's just saying green-red, so Wild Ruby. And that's actually, I like that combination, personally. Okay. That's my current constructed deck is a green Ruby deck. It's not a Pauper deck, but it's green Ruby. Wild Ruby.
Right. So. Okay, so yeah, okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and take that challenge. Should you open your packs to get started, Sprinkles? I am going to tell you no, you should draft them. But you might want to watch some people draft their draft first to get a good feel for some of the best ways to draft. But this way, you get to look at more cards and you can add to your collection what you want. It's going to give you a better, and it's going to give you more out of your packs. So I would not open all your packs.
I will say though, I agree with the logic. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, Aaron, you said this, and then pretty much everyone is saying, for good reason, to get the most value out of your cards, you draft. True. On the other hand, if you already have, a whole bunch of packs, keep in mind that to get into draft, you do have to, pay the platinum.
Pay the dollar.
So pay the dollar, which really isn't that much. Admittedly, it's not that much. So it's a good way to go. There's probably not a problem. I mean, depending on how many packs you have, like if you want to crack open a couple, fine. But it is true, if you want to get the value, the most value you can from the cards, you go for the drafting.
So using the, of course, I'm a big advocate of this website. I had Mr. Bogdan on the program a couple of episodes ago, who is actually the creator of this website. So the first thing we do is we're going to make it so we're only looking at commons and uncommons, and then we change our colors so it says no color, so we get all the artifacts and then the resources, which are no color, and we turn on Ruby and Wild, so that's the only cards that we're going to see in the deck. So we're going to go ahead and start off probably by picking our power cards. We need to choose some good uncommons. I don't really want to choose Shards of Fate. Now, when we're in 2 shards, we talked about this prior to the episode, HexBoss and I. When you're in 2 shards, you are going to you kind of want those Shards of Fate, but that's why it might be better to go mono color with these decks. But we're going to take the challenge tonight and go with the double shard. We do get removal, and with Wild we get some beats. So I mean, we do have that going for us. I'm thinking somewhat strongly about Honeycap, but we are in 2 shards, so that seems like not the best. Right. In fact, let's just look at uncommons right now, so we can pick our power cards.
Power cards, all right.
So we've got that. Chlorophylla is maybe a 1-of if we decide to run it. Nelebrin Skirmisher is a possibility.
The one thing you have to keep in mind with the Skirmisher is the socketing. So let me quickly go over to the client here. It's not relevant to this deck, but if you were doing a Pauper deck, personally, if you were doing a Pauper deck that was green Sapphire, I would strongly recommend the Skirmisher. Reason being that if you look at the card, it gets 1/1 for being able every time it hits a champion.
Every time it deals
combine
damage.
That with right, and if you combine that with the Minor Flight gem, godly. It's very good that way. High value card.
But the Minor Flight's in Sapphire.
Right, yeah, so that's not relevant here. I'm trying to think what we have.
I'm looking at Squirrel Titan pretty intensely right now, and possibly...
Squirrel Titan is good. especially when you combine that with
chlorophylla, like a single chlorophylla, and then we can run a bunch of other cards. So I think that's the route I'm going to go right now. But it might be difficult to get a good curve going.
Right.
With Squirrel Titan. So we'll just tentatively, I think we'll just go ahead and go 4 Squirrel Titan and 1 chlorophylla for the support element there. So now we're going to go to our commons. So we're kind of more heavily into wild already on this deck.
Personal favorite for me, if we're going for Pauper Wild, is going to be where is it here?
Well, mono wild, you definitely want that.
Cottontail Ronin. Cottontail Ronin. Reason I say that is because it is a 0/2 with rage. The 2 defense is really key with only the 1 cost, because that will be able to block most anything pretty efficiently. Actually, and plus the additional rage, especially if you can get it out turn 1 or 2, is really good. Even if you're not running a Shin Hair deck, I personally really like using the Ronin.
It's got a lot of pent up rage in there, you know.
It does. I know. Them bunnies.
I still want to see a bunny that's a resource dork. That's what I want to see. That's what needs to happen. Just saying. Needs to happen. I don't know if that's going to be a lore decision where they won't be able to do it or what, though.
I think
so they're showing Shards of Fate as a common?
Which
be
Ronin?
Right.
Yep, Ronin's a common.
No, Shards of Fate.
Oh, Shards of Fate.
They're showing it as a common. Is that right? Because if it is, then we got to play it. I thought it was uncommon. Okay, we'll figure it out. Someone will tell me in my channel and correct me in like 30 seconds, you know, because, you know, the delay. Right. We definitely want these Howling Braves because we are basically running a ramp deck at this point. Ronin's a possibility as well, because you're right, he's very strong, especially now that he's got 2 defense. Someone's saying Shards of Fate is common, so I'm going to accept that. And we'll go ahead and play 4 of those. So that makes the deck infinitely better. I've talked about this a lot. I see a lot of times when people submit decks to me, they get a little bit scared with Shards of Fate, and so they're like, oh, I'll run 2 or 3. And I'm like, look, this card is both a wild shard and a ruby shard. And if I could run, I don't know, 20 Shards of Fate in my deck, I would do it. Because that would basically make the deck much, much more consistent. So whenever you get a chance to run dual shards or dual resources, I would say a lot of times you want to do it. There's only like very few instances in a dual shard or triple shard deck. You almost never do it in a triple shard, but in a dual shard deck where you wouldn't, and that's like if your top of your range is going to be like 4 or 3, something like that. Like, and when I say that, that's like the highest casting cost in the deck. So we're already.
Do we have any Feral Ogres in this deck?
We don't yet. We should probably put some in though.
Probably should.
Put some combat tricks.
Yep.
Tricksy hobbitses.
Right. Yes. Well, if we're going for wild combat tricks, the go-to is going to be Wild Growth.
Wild Aura, Wild Growth. Wild Growth is. So the thing with Wild Growth is it tosses itself back into your deck. So there's a chance you could draw it late in the game where you really don't want to see it. So I actually really like Wild Aura, but we'll see it. This will probably be mostly curve dependent as far as what the numbers end up being there. But Wild Aura, although it's still a combat trick, it gives them +2/+2 in that crush, and it stays. And I just like the fact, I actually like the fact that it doesn't shuffle back in. So. Because I don't want to draw it again and again and again a lot of times.
Right. Another combat trick that we can use is Crushing Blow. It is a 1-cost ruby that's common, gives a terp 2/2 and crush for that turn.
Right, and that is another good one as well. I agree. We could probably run more like 1 or 2 of those. So another great combat trick. This is a great draft pick as well as a combat trick because it gives them that crush, could push through damage when you need it. Does a lot of good things. You know, it's like maybe a 2 of tops in a draft deck. You know, and then in a constructed deck, you probably wouldn't run more than 3. I wouldn't think. I put the Ruby Aura in tentatively. Arena Brawlers and Bombsmith. Bombsmith, of course, gives us maybe something. I think I like Sensei better though than Bombsmith for 2.
Which one, Minaru or of the
Munaro Sensei?
I don't. Minaru Sensei.
Yeah, cantrips me
Card
1.
draw's nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a body, it cantrips me 1. Seems pretty good. Which champion should we go with? It would probably be maybe Monika'shin because we got combat tricks.
Maybe. You could also go with, let me see.
So
I mean, Poka is an option as well.
Some things to get those. And Polka would probably also be good.
I guess in theory, I was gonna say Lionel Flynn. I'm not sure about that one. You know, target troop gets +3 attack, 0 defense.
You gotta have troops for that to happen.
Yeah.
So he might be better when the troop really takes advantage of it, and we're really not running any of those troops. Most of those troops are rare. So we don't even really have access to them. Our 3-point range, we really need something in that 3-point range is what I'm noticing right now off the bat before we start cutting cards out of the deck. So we're actually going to look for things actively to fill in that 3-point range that are going to work with our deck with what we're trying to do. So in that common range, we probably won't find very much.
Are we looking at troops or by 3-point?
We're looking for anything that's going to work well for our deck. So let's see. I don't want troops. I want cost equals 3. And this is just how fast it is, like working with this, which is really nice compared to like if you had a card collection. You got to thumb through all these cards, sort things, all that stuff. So
you've got, in terms of 3 cost, you've got Evolve, obviously classic wild.
Yeah.
Boost. Put that in.
We don't have a lot of good stuff. We have Gem-Crazed Berserker, which we talked about tonight, so that's probably going to be the pick because we can get some evasion out of him, or Effigy. I think I like Gem-Crazed Berserker better, but Effigy is better for the dual colors because it's going to be easier to cast. So it depends on how we gem them, really. I think we could just tentatively put them both in and just see what the curve looks like. So if we need more Ruby cards, yeah, we'll just tentatively just throw them both in. So these are also like Gem-Crazed. Effigy is probably the better draft card because it's more versatile, depending on what your deck's going to do. But Gem-Crazed Berserker, of course, we've seen that in Mono Ruby, and we've seen that do quite well for people with haste. You could also throw in the gem we talked about tonight to give it some evasion, where it can only be blocked by a Ruby or artifact type troops. The Ruby, whatever it's called, thing.
Ruby of Flames.
Ruby Flame, whatever it was. That Ruby of Flames, yeah, can't be blocked. Yeah, we could put that in there as well. Okay, so moving back to the deck. So we tentatively just threw 24 shards in here. We'll probably try to bust this down to maybe 23. We only need to actually dump about 11 cards. Our curve is not the greatest right now, so we need to take a good look at that, good hard look at that. We might actually be able to change some ratios on our I think right away what I'm going to do is change the ratio on Squirrel Titan and Chlorophilia to give me better chance to ramp early on, and then that way I won't flood on Crazed Squirrel Titans. But if you wanted to, it wouldn't be necessarily wrong to gamble and run the 4 Squirrel Titans because it is a 2-for-1, giving you a body while killing something most of the time. Right. So we got 15, so 71. So those are our uncommons. That's why we swapped those around. What are we going to socket in Boulder Brute? Not sure.
Well,
we've got a lot of socket troops in here. Possibly. Yeah, we have 3 different
Boulder
socket
Brute,
troops.
a combat, nice, it's not really a combat trick, but one thing that I've liked about, because I've used Boulder Brute before, is putting in, what is it? It's the red gem that gives it speed.
Yeah, so we could do that.
That's actually a really nice one. Here we go. Let's see.
We also have deal damage with its power, which is the destruction one. We aren't doing a lot of bouncing, so that's probably not as good. We've got ferocity, which is the speed, and the Ruby side of things. We could make it a 5/5, make it a bigger body, which might be relevant in this format. Spell shield's always nice. Probably not that relevant, as there won't be anything that can deal with a 4 toughness a lot of times. Let's see. Troop gets.
Yeah, personally, I'd either go with the Wild Orb of Primordium, the +1/1, or the
Rhinos.
Rhinos are a possibility too.
Yeah, I like Rhinos. Let's do Rhinos on this guy because people aren't going to want to stop.
Now wait, that's a prime though. That's a prime though. That's a major socket.
Yeah, okay. We don't have major sockets. Okay, yeah, so we can only look at this. So either the +1/+1 or the one you said, probably the
frosting, the speed.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, a 4/4 with speed is pretty potent. I mean, that's something your opponent is going to have to deal with right there, and depending on what else you have on the board.
I mean, the soonest we could cast this guy is like on turn 3, possibly.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. I really like Primordium here with the +1/+1 because, I mean, I like having a bigger body in this format, I think. So, I mean, it's up to you guys. Obviously, different strokes for different folks. So HexBoss is saying Ferocity. I'm saying Primordium. I would have put Primordium in here. So, you know, choose what you will there. Moving down to these guys, Effigy and Crazed Berserker. We might even just keep both of them. And start finding cuts in other places right now. So the Wild Aura, probably maybe buff that up or something. I just don't like this curve. I kind of want a nicer curve to the deck is what I want to see. Plus we got Pyromancer that also buffs a lot of things too. Sensei may not be as good as I originally thought with some of the other things we're running in here. I think we're pretty heavy on Wild right now. I'll do analysis. Yeah, our Wild is crazy go nuts with 36 icons, and there's 11 Ruby icons. And so I think we can easily start. That's probably our highest cut cards. It's probably going to be Wild cards. So we're going to go ahead and cut these senseis because they're really just not very big bodies. They do cantrip us, but we aren't really doing a whole lot with that. The Ruby Aura. I like the Ruby Aura because a lot of our stuff has really weak back ends. And it can trade maybe a little bit better than some of the other things we could do as a combat trick. It also doesn't shuffle back into the deck, and we already discussed that.
Yeah, and the Swift Strike is going to be really good.
Right. Took Crushing Blow down to 1. We could probably just dump Wild Growth altogether, I think. Unless you just want to have it in there as something like... I mean, I guess you could keep it in there because you want to have that one card where you're just like, oh, I could have it. I might. I've seen people top deck this twice in a row and be completely exhausted. Man, is that frustrating.
It is. It is.
66
yeah, I don't know.
cards
Personally,
right now.
I like both of them. Honestly, I mean, Wild Growth works really well for defense. You have to keep in mind if you're going to use Crushing Blow, it only works if you're attacking. And the Crush is nice. But Wild Growth,
we are going to be pretty offensive out the gate, I think. With this
if we're going for offense, because the thing is, with a Wild Growth, you can buff yourself up and get completely chump blocked and it does nothing for you. Whereas if you use Crushing Blow, the additional damage, you have Crush and you can go, smack them over the face.
Well, and Wild Growth can save your blocker as well.
It can, yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Sapper's Charges now as well. I'm not sure if I want to play all 4 of them because they are somewhat slow. We're trying to be aggressive. The best thing they're going to do for you is clear the path. The removal we have, oh, you know what we don't have is like, we don't have, what is it called in here? Burn. Burn should be common, right?
I believe it is a common, yes.
Yeah, it's common. So yeah, I would definitely want to have 4 burn over 4 Sapper's Charge. And the reason why is because when Sapper's Charge is on the table, your opponent sees it, they can plan around it. With burn, it's a little bit harder to play around, and it's much more of a combat trick that I can do. It's much more versatile. So that's much better.
And most anything that's going to get played in the early game, turns 1 through 3, burn probably can take care of.
For sure. So I think the choice right now is basically, do we want Wild Growth or Crushing Blow? And I think we're going to go ahead and dump the Wild Growth. And this is mostly based upon the fact that we have a lot of Wild in the deck already. Other cuts that we might make might be this Feral Ogre because it's double threshold. Although we did get the Shards of Fate, which I didn't think we had access to. Cottontail Ronin's another one we might take down to like 2. Could be another good choice there as well. Because I think we're still like over budgeted on Wild by, yeah, we have 30 Wild icons and 14 Ruby icons. So Wild are still the prime candidates for us to cut from this deck right now. We need to talk about what we're going to gem in these Effigy and then the Gem-Crazed Berserker as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take Cottontail Ronin down to 2, and that's going to kind of even that out. I kind of want a little bit less in this 1-point range because the late game, if I draw a 1-point card, a lot of times it's not going to do a lot for me. But I'm not sure what I can cut right now. Maybe a burn. And I'm also looking at Gem-Crazed Berserker. So our curve is looking pretty crappy. Again, we're running in a format where we had not that many cards because we have only one set to pull from, and we gimped ourselves by not allowing ourselves to play with rares. So this is going to happen. Like, we don't have a lot of options here. So that does make it somewhat more difficult. A little bit more of a challenge, if you will. I think maybe we'll get rid of some of our top-end cards. Maybe a Boulder Brute. And we can trade around another Squirrel Titan for... oh, you know what we need? Oh, what's Burn to the Ground? Is that...
That is common.
I think it's not common. I think it's uncommon. But that's fine, because I could actually trade a Squirrel Titan for it.
True.
Yeah,
true.
So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to actually run just one Burn to the Ground. We've got a lot of ramp in here, and this can end games outright. So we're going to run that, and we're going to dump a Squirrel Titan for that to help us out with curve here. So things are already looking a little bit better, and then we already dumped a Boulder Brute. We're down to 61 cards. I kind of wish I had more in this 4-point range, but the only option I have is like that's decent is Wild Aura. So I don't have like a great choice to make there. I'm really looking hard at these Feral Ogres. Let's see what this does to our curve here. It's really not the greatest. Our early game is amazing, and then like we kind of peter off, which is fine, I think.
Right.
And we have like, so we have a lot of these resource dorks, these Howling Braves in here, but we have buffs for them, so that helps out. So they do become, they'll still be somewhat relevant in the late game. You have to be careful, of course, as always, to how many buffs are you running, because you give your opponent a possible 2-for-1 if they kill your creature in response. So like, for instance, let's say that I attack with this Gem-Crazed Berserker, and my opponent blocks with something that's like a 2/2 or something, and then I throw a crushing blow on the Gem-Crazed Berserker to save him. Then my opponent, like in response, burns him. So the burn will go through first, killing the Gem-Crazed Berserker. Then the crushing blow will resolve with no target, so it basically gets countered. The Gem-Crazed Berserker is not there any longer; it's in the graveyard, and the my opponent's blocking creature is completely safe because there's no Gem-Crazed Berserker to deal damage to it. And in which I have basically given up a 2-for-1, both the Gem-Crazed Berserker, the crushing blow, for my opponent's 1 burn. So you always have to be careful on how many buffs you're playing in the deck, because you need to make sure that you have troops to buff, and then also the buffs have to be good enough that it's worthwhile for you to like possibly lose a body. But like throwing Ruby Aura on Cottontail Ronin is pretty crazy go nuts. Just gonna say that. Seems pretty good.
Yep.
Or even Wild Aura. Both of those things on Cottontail Ronin is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we're back down to 59.
Just agreeing with what you're saying about make sure that you have troops to put buffs on. There are a few things more frustrating than having a handful of buffs and nothing to throw them on.
Right, which is why, again, I think I'm going to advocate running Monika'shin in here, and that's because she'll give you more troops to throw buffs on if you happen to have, like, if you have Monika'shin and now you've got a Battle Hopper, and then you happen to top deck Wild Aura and you're in top deck mode, and in an empty board state, you have an 0-1. Now your Battle Hopper becomes a 2/3 Battle Hopper with Crush, which is better than an 0-1 Battle Hopper. So I think that if I was going to run this deck, Monika'shin would be my choice. However, it wouldn't be wrong to try out Polka like we talked about before. I would say it's pretty wrong though to run the typical wild. What do you call it? The guy that, what's he do? He gives you 5 life. I think that would be completely wrong.
Running Deer?
Yeah, Running Deer would be completely wrong in this deck, because this isn't a true ramp deck. We aren't trying to hold out for these giant like troops, because we don't have access to them. We don't have our Shadim, and we don't have well, we used to have Fist of Brigadon that, he used to be good until they came out with much better things. But we don't have access to those cards, so this isn't a true ramp deck, so we don't want to run a Running Deer in this deck, I would say. So let's go ahead and put our champion on here. As always, I'll be linking this below in the YouTube, and you guys will have access to it. If you're looking at it right now, it's deck number 6424. If you want to look at it as we're building it here. Let's see. So champion type. I want champion. I hate looking through all the cards for these. Okay, so champion, and then Monika'shin. There we go. Now we've got a champion. So there's our champion. Of course, Monika'shin is 3 create a Battle Hopper, 3 charges to create a Battle Hopper, which is an 0-1 troop. So that will work with our deck pretty nicely. It gives us something to buff in an open board state. if we get swept out. So now we need to do the count, and I think all the work we did to get rid of all those wild cards did make it a little bit better. We're still a little bit heavy in wild, so it's about, like, I would say a 2-3 split. So we could probably, yeah, about there. So we'll probably, a 9-10 would be okay, but I would probably go with an 8-11 split on the shards. And so if you're counting this up, and you're doing your ratios, you basically count up all of your shards of fate as these other shards. So we have 15 wild shards and 12 ruby shards in the deck. We went ahead and we went with 23. It wouldn't necessarily be wrong to cut some card and go up to 24. We do have a lot of expensive cards, but we've also got a lot of ramp. So you could also count all of the Howling Braves as like half a resource. So really, if you count it that way, we've got 2 more resources on top of our 15 wild shards. So we've actually got like 17 wild shards in this deck. Of course, you can't always count on those Howling Braves, because if you don't have a wild shard in play, you can't play them. So there is that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Of course, you know, you can try a lot of different things with this type of Pauper deck. You got to find someone that decides that they want to play Pauper with you. So definitely, you know, prerequisite that. Again, the format is 5 uncommon cards, and then all the rest have to be common. It's a really great format to play against people, and especially when you don't have huge card collections. So there's also another alternate format for people that have heard of Commander. Commander usually is run 100 singleton cards. Basically, you can only have one of, except for basic shards of each card in the deck, and then your Commander, those are the shards you can run in the deck, although in Hex we might do it a little bit differently. And your Commander, there's a Pauper Commander where your Commander is not rare or legendary. Your Pauper, and it's not unique. It's basically any uncommon card is your Commander, and it runs by the same rules. So that's another variant you could try with Pauper. So anything to add before we close out this deck doctor in the episode, HexBoss?
Not really. I think one thing that will be interesting as we're looking at Pauper is right now, you know, in PvP, of course, you can play Pauper against someone else. One thing that I will think is going to be interesting is looking at Pauper decks once we start having serious PvE content coming out.
Right.
Because obviously, if you're running into PvE content and dungeons and all of, you know, quests and all that with, you know, rares and uncommons and legendaries, gonna have a good time. But I think since a lot of people are going to want to get into PvE, and Cryptozoic themselves have said that PvE content is going to be very accessible, I think it'll be interesting to test. I mean, I'm planning on doing this. I am planning, once we have, you know, solid PvE content coming out, running through the content with probably just a starter deck, like a completely free account, and see, you know, how well I can do, how far I can go.
Right.
But looking at cheap ones like this and seeing, you know, how viable are these decks, you know, going into that.
We didn't gem our Effigy and our Crazed Berserker, so I would probably run like haste in this Crazed Berserker, and then in the Effigy I would probably run the what's it called, the Ruby gem, where it basically makes him harder to block. The Ruby of Flames is probably what I would run, but it wouldn't be wrong to reverse those. It depends on what you feel in the deck. That's probably what I would do. Just wanted to say that really quick at the end. And then also with Pauper, just so you know, with Magic the Gathering Online, they actually, the format got popular enough that they actually made it into a format that you could play against other players competitively and pay to play 8-person constructed tournaments with, and they set the rules down for it, and so it checks your decks. And of course, in Magic terms, with Pauper, there's a banned list, and it's any card basically all the way back to Alpha, but there is a banned list for it. So that kind of opens up a lot of things. Of course, we don't have the card pool that Magic does. But, you know, Cryptozoic has already said that they want to support multiple different types of competitive formats. So, in my mind, what that means is we will see Commander, we'll see Pauper, we'll see Pauper Commander, we're going to see all kinds of different formats, and even maybe some new formats that are not available for people that are, you know, Magic inclined because of the digital-only nature of the game. So...
and I really hope we start seeing that. I mean, one of the things that, you know, as much as I'm loving drafting right now and doing those tournaments, it is kind of a higher barrier to entry in terms of, like, the skill to be able to do it and everything else. For those of us who are invested into the game, or, you know, maybe have Magic experience, and for other players who aren't quite in Hex yet, I think that mode is really going to appeal. But for people who may be, you know, starting to get into trading card games, or more of that for lack of a better term, the Hearthstone-ish-esque audience. I mean, Hearthstone is really friendly for, people who just...
yeah. It's going to get a lot of people into TCGs in general. And I think that's like the best thing about Hearthstone is that it's going to show people TCGs that may never have really given them a second look, because the barrier level, like you said, for some people is a little bit high.
It is, and that's one thing that Hearthstone has done incredibly well, is really lower that barrier to entry. Right. And I love the facts. I mean, the fact that Hex has those high, those highly competitive ones. But I would like to see Hex, as development time goes on, introduce those lower, those easier modes to get into. I mean, they're already going to do it with Sealed by making it asynchronous. Right. But I would love to see Cryptozoic, make Hex. We have the high caliber players covered. I'd love to see them do things that introduce players who maybe haven't even played Hearthstone come into Hex, and just really comfortable, affordable ways to just get introduced to the concept, so that eventually you could get into those higher levels of play.
Right, yeah, like a training mode and things like that. Yeah, it would definitely be a good thing. So, tonight on Deck Building with the Squire, episode 29, I had HexBoss on. We talked about some cool backgrounds with him, and we reminisced a little bit about Pokemon. Yeah, that was kind of fun. It's true, we did. And then we talked about a little bit of the Threshold store controversy that they talked about a couple of weeks last week on their show. And if you haven't checked out Threshold, I encourage you to do so. I believe they're a Threshold podcast. Then we talked about how drafts are live, and everyone's excited about that those are working right. We talked about the Friday update, and how it is that you are not going to abuse this game by gemming one of your guys with the Ruby gem of, what was it, Ferocity. Right. It's because because it's active all the time, and it's not supposed to be. Then we also went over this Pauper deck, which is going to be linked below on the YouTube when this gets syndicated. And that was pretty much it. And also I kind of footnoted my game, so if you're interested in that, I will also have a link for that at the very bottom of the content, because I know a lot of people want to just see the Hex stuff. So, but if you are interested, play my game and tell me what you think about it. So
I'd have
that's
to check
pretty
that
much
out myself.
Yeah, HexBoss, go ahead and plug your content. Let the people know how to find you.
You can find me 3 different ways. You can find me on Twitter, HexBoss_Codex. In game, I'm Codex Reaper. That's not the main way to get a hold of me, but if you see Codex Reaper in game, that is me. So Twitter is HexBoss Codex. You can also find me on Twitch at HexBoss_TV. And of course, my main website, which I will post here. Let me see. Yep, I'm posting it in the chat right now. HexBossPVE.com is my website, and that's going to be, it's going to be filled with PvE and lore content once, it actually gets released. But those are the places you can find me. So that's my content there. I will probably add a YouTube channel in there eventually, but, once I start getting into video walkthroughs and guides and all of that. But that's me. That's what I do.
All right. Yep. And just a footnote, I haven't forgotten about the contest that I set down in episode 27. Again, that's going to run until it is that we get trading in game. So those 5 packs are still up for grabs. If you want to go back, look at episode 27. There's a challenge, a deck building challenge for you, the viewers, to send me decks with some stipulations. Other than that, this is Aaron Squire signing off, saying God bless you and your families. Try not to rage too much. And I don't know if HexBoss has anything to say. Do you have a thing?
I will see you. I will see you in game. I see you on Twitter, whatever. And most importantly, I'll see you in Entrath once that world opens up.
All right. Seems pretty good.